The wind that swept through Whitby's narrow lanes carried the scent of salt and rust. Isla Thorne pulled her scarf tighter as she stepped off the coach, clutching the letter that had brought her here. The solicitor's office had been brief. Her late grandfather, Alaric Thorne, had left her a property. A clockmaker's workshop, the man had said, closed for nearly 30 years. Isla had never met the man. Her mother, before she died, had refused to speak of him at all. Now, standing before the shop, Isla felt an odd chill. The sign above the door read Thorne and Sons Horologists. The paint faded to near dust. The windows were opaque with grime, and behind them, the faint outline of countless clocks loomed in silence. She unlocked the heavy door with the brass key. The air inside was thick with the scent of oil and wood. Hundreds of clocks lined the walls, grandfather clocks, mantel clocks, pocket watches, all frozen at different times. Dust motes drifted in the grey light from the high windows. On the counter lay a small wooden box sealed with wax. Isla broke the seal. Inside, she found another key, iron, old, and cold to the touch, and a folded note written in an elegant hand. Do not open the clock in the back room before midnight. Her pulse quickened. She looked around, half expecting someone to step out from the shadows. But there was only the soft creak of old floorboards. As dusk fell over Whitby, Isla explored further. The back room was smaller, the air colder. Against the far wall stood a tall, ornate clock unlike any she had ever seen. Its face was silver, engraved with constellations. The pendulum had been stopped mid-swing. Isla hesitated. The iron key from the box fit perfectly into the small lock beneath the dial. She turned it slightly, just to test it, and the clock gave a deep, resonant hum, as though it had taken a slow breath after years of silence. Startled, she stepped back. The hands moved a fraction, then stopped. From somewhere inside the mechanism came a faint ticking. It was not the sound of gears. It was too irregular, too alive. And then, from behind the wall, she heard it. A single, muffled heartbeat. Isla froze. The clock ticked once more, and the sound of the heartbeat grew louder, steady now, human, rhythmic, and frighteningly close. Morning came to Whitby with a heavy fog, the kind that blurred the cobblestones and swallowed the sound of footsteps. Isla woke on the old sofa in the workshop, the note from last night still clutched in her hand. The air felt thicker than before, and somewhere deep within the walls, she could still hear a faint ticking. She convinced herself it was only the echo of old gears settling, but unease lingered like a shadow. Determined to uncover more, Isla began searching through the drawers and shelves of the clockmaker's bench. She found stacks of ledgers, all written in her grandfather's careful handwriting. Each entry listed the name of a customer, the date, and a description of a clock. But at the very bottom of one page, the ink changed. A different hand had written in red. Time belongs to those who dare to keep it. The words sent a chill down her spine. In a box of broken watch faces, she found an old photograph. It showed her grandfather, younger than she had imagined, standing proudly beside a tall clock, the same one from the back room. But beside him stood another man, thin and sharp-eyed, wearing a dark coat and a strange pendant shaped like an hourglass. On the back of the photograph were 5 words written in pencil. He never should have lived. A sound from behind startled her. The pendulum of the silver clock had begun to swing again, slowly, steadily, without her touching it. Isla stepped closer, her breath visible in the cold air. The dial's glass reflected her face, and for the briefest moment, another reflection flickered beside hers. A man's face. She spun around, but the room was empty. Suddenly, the clock struck once. The chime was deep and metallic, resonating through the floor. At that exact instant, the front door creaked open by itself, letting in a gust of icy wind. A shadow passed across the threshold. "Who's there?" Isla called out, her voice trembling. No answer came, only the faint smell of smoke and the whisper of something shifting in the dark corridor beyond the workshop. Then she saw it. Footprints. Wet ones. Leading from the open door, straight toward the back room. Isla followed the wet footprints, her heartbeat echoing louder than the ticking that came from the back of the shop. The prints were fresh, glistening on the floorboards, yet she had locked the door the night before. She reached the back room. The tall silver clock stood silent once more, its pendulum frozen mid-swing. But the air around it pulsed faintly, as though the room itself was breathing. Her fingers brushed the clock's cold frame. The metal was warmer than it should have been. She leaned closer, listening. Beneath the casing, something shifted, a soft sigh, almost human. "Hello," she whispered. No answer came, only the faint hum of gears beginning to turn on their own. The hands of the clock trembled, then moved backwards, 1 minute at a time, ticking in reverse. The light in the room flickered. The temperature dropped sharply, and her breath misted in the air. Then, faintly, she heard a voice. It was not clear at first, more like a whisper tangled within the tick-tock rhythm. But as she strained to listen, words began to form. "You opened the gate." Isla stumbled back, knocking over a stool. "Who's there?" she shouted, her voice cracking. The whisper came again, closer this time. "Not all clocks keep time, Isla. Some, take it." A sudden gust of air burst from the clock's face, scattering papers across the floor. The pendulum began to swing violently, clanging against its glass casing. Isla shielded her face from the shards as the clock's door burst open. Inside was not the expected web of brass gears, but a hollow cavity lined with silver mechanisms that moved like veins beneath skin. And there, at its center, rested a small, glass sphere filled with swirling mist and a faint glow. It pulsed, like a heart. The mist inside shifted, and for a moment, Isla saw something within it, a flash of a man's face, pale and twisted in fear. Then the mist folded inward and vanished. The pendulum stilled. Silence returned. Isla, trembling, reached out and touched the glass sphere. It was warm. A faint jolt of electricity ran through her fingers, and memories not her own flickered in her mind, streets she'd never walked, voices she'd never heard, a woman screaming for help near the sea. Then, from behind her, a voice spoke clearly. "You shouldn't have touched it." She spun around, and gasped. Standing in the doorway was the man from the photograph. For a long moment, Isla could not move. The man stood in the doorway, shadows clinging to the folds of his dark coat. His eyes, cold, grey, and unblinking, fixed upon her. You're him," Isla stammered, her throat tight. "You're the man in the photograph." He tilted his head slightly. "So you've seen it." His voice was low, almost musical, yet carried the weight of something that did not belong to this time. "Then you know I am not your enemy, unless you make me one." Isla's hand trembled as she reached for the nearest object, a wrench lying on the workbench. "What do you want?" The man stepped closer. The air around him shimmered faintly, like heat above tarmac. "I came for what your grandfather took from me." His eyes flicked to the glass sphere inside the clock. "It doesn't belong to you." "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He paused, then smiled without warmth. "A soul that was never meant to stop." The words chilled her to the bone. He moved toward the clock, but the moment he stepped across the threshold, the pendulum jerked violently, and the clock let out a groan like metal under strain. The man flinched, retreating a step. "It won't let me enter," he muttered. He sealed it well. "Who are you?" Isla demanded. He looked at her then, truly looked, as if studying her for something beyond what she appeared to be. "My name was Elias Wren once. I was your grandfather's apprentice. Until he betrayed me." "Betrayed you how?" Elias' expression hardened. "He used me to test his creation." He promised eternal time, a way to trap a moment forever. But he didn't tell me what it would cost. The light flickered, casting long, trembling shadows. When he turned that clock on, Elias continued, it didn't just stop time, it stopped me. My life was bound to it. When the pendulum ceased, so did my heart. Isla's pulse thundered in her ears. Then the heartbeat I heard was mine, he interrupted, his voice breaking for the first time. Half a man, half a ghost, suspended between seconds. He looked past her, his gaze softening. And now, you've woken it. Which means the seal is failing. When it breaks entirely, every clock in this town will stop. The words hung in the air, heavy and unreal. Outside, the wind howled through Whitby's empty streets, carrying the distant sound of bells. But inside the workshop, a louder sound rose, the ticking of every clock on the walls, all beginning to move in unison. Elias turned sharply, eyes wide. It's already begun. Every clock in the workshop was alive. The air trembled with the rhythmic pulse of hundreds of ticking hearts. Isla stood frozen as the sound grew deafening, an orchestra of time out of control. Elias turned toward her, his voice raised over the din. He bound me to the heart of the mechanism, but he did not stop there. He fed the clocks with fragments of others, souls, memories, lives stolen in seconds. What are you saying? Isla shouted. You mean, these clocks contain people? Elias nodded grimly. Each one is a prisoner of its own moment. Your grandfather thought he could master time, but he only broke it apart. Suddenly, one of the clocks on the wall began to chime. Then another. Then 10 more, all ringing at once. The sound built into a violent storm of bells. Isla covered her ears, but the noise pierced straight into her mind, bringing flashes of other lives. She saw a child running through a garden, an old woman weeping by a pier, a man screaming as water closed over his head. Each image felt like a heartbeat of another world, and when she gasped for breath, she realized her own pulse had matched the ticking. Elias grabbed her shoulders. You have to stop it before it consumes you. How? Isla cried. Tell me what to do. He pointed to the silver clock. Break the sphere. That's where it begins. But you said it's your life. His expression softened. Better that mine ends than all of theirs. Before Isla could answer, the floor trembled. The glass in the windows shuddered, and the silver clock began to crack down its center, light spilling from within like molten stars. Elias staggered, gripping the wall. The seal, he tied it to blood. It's reacting to you. To me. You're his bloodline, Elias gasped. You are the key. The thorn name can either close it, or destroy it forever. The light burst from the clock, swallowing the room in white fire. The ticking stopped, completely. Silence pressed against Isla's ears like water. When the glow faded, the workshop was gone. She stood in an open field beneath a night sky filled with unmoving stars. The silver clock towered before her, standing alone in the grass, its pendulum swinging slowly. And beside it, her grandfather. Alive. Grandfather. Isla whispered, her voice barely reaching her own ears. The old man turned slowly, his white hair gleaming under the motionless stars. His eyes, grey and sharp, held both sorrow and something colder, something almost eternal. I wondered when you would come, he said. The clocks chose you, as I knew they would. Isla stepped closer, her shoes pressing into the damp grass. You're alive. I thought you were dead. In a sense, he murmured. I am neither living nor gone. Time will not let me go until my work is complete. She swallowed hard, her gaze flickering to the silver clock that loomed behind him. Elias told me what you did. That you trapped souls in your clocks. His jaw tightened. You misunderstand. I preserved them. The dying, the forgotten, the moments slipping into decay, I gave them permanence. You stole them, Isla said fiercely. You imprisoned them in metal and glass. He turned sharply, his expression darkening. Do you think time is kind? It devours everything you love. I merely held it still long enough for beauty to survive. Isla shook her head. You played God. He smiled faintly. Perhaps. But gods and clockmakers are not so different, we both measure eternity in ticking seconds. Before Isla could answer, the sky above began to shift. The stars trembled, flickering as though shaken by an unseen wind. The silver clock behind her grandfather glowed brighter, its pendulum swinging faster. What's happening? She asked. It's breaking, he said calmly. Elias has interfered too long. The balance cannot hold if the heart is touched by mortal hands. Then stop it. Isla pleaded. I cannot. She looked at him in disbelief. You made it. Yes, he said softly. And only one of my blood can unmake it. The ground split beneath them, grass turning to shards of glass that reflected countless faces, people trapped within every tick of the silver clock. Their mouths moved soundlessly, begging, screaming. Release them, Isla, her grandfather said, stepping back toward the glowing sphere. But understand this, to free them is to end me. And to end me is to shatter time itself. You will never know what moment comes next. The world will forget the order of days. Isla trembled. You mean, everything will stop? Not stop, he whispered. Scatter. As he reached toward the pendulum, a voice echoed behind her, Elias, shouting her name. When she turned, he was running through the fractured air, his form half made of light, half of shadow. Don't listen to him. The curse binds him, not you. But Isla hesitated. Between them, the silver clock pulsed like a living heart, one beat away from either salvation or ruin. She raised her hand, fingers hovering above the glowing sphere. And the world began to collapse around her. The silver clock's heartbeat thundered through Isla's chest. Every tick echoed like a drum against the hollow sky. Elias was shouting something behind her, but his voice warped, stretched, time itself was coming apart. Her grandfather reached out a trembling hand. Choose wisely, Isla. Every life depends on what you do next. The ground beneath her fractured further, revealing a chasm of swirling light and shadow. Through it, she could see moments from her own life, her mother's laughter by the harbor, her first day fixing watches, the quiet mornings alone with her coffee. Each memory flickered, threatening to vanish. She realized then that the silver clock didn't just hold strangers. It held her. Elias stumbled forward, his arm bleeding from a shard of falling glass. If you touch it, you'll become part of it. You'll take his place. Her grandfather's expression softened, his voice almost kind. Yes. But she will save them all. Even you, Elias. I don't need saving, Elias growled. You're the one who damned this place. Lightning split the air. The sound of countless clocks filled the world, ticking in wild chaos. Isla could barely breathe. She pressed her palms to her ears, but the sound was inside her, every beat of her heart synchronizing with the clocks around her. And then she heard it, one soft, familiar chime. Her mother's lullaby hummed through the ticking. Isla looked up. The glowing pendulum slowed, flickering between silver and gold. She suddenly understood. The clocks didn't trap life, they preserved love, frozen in the instant before it faded. Her grandfather had been wrong, but not entirely. The magic had never been about control. It had always been about grief. Grandfather, she whispered, tears glimmering in her eyes, you couldn't let them go. He looked at her, eyes wet with guilt. I didn't know how. The pendulum stopped. Time froze. And Isla moved. She grasped the sphere with both hands. The metal burned her skin, light flooding through her veins. She screamed, but not from pain. From release. Elias reached for her, but she was already fading into light, her body dissolving into threads of time. The clocks around them began to slow, then stop, one by one, until the world was silent. When the glow faded, the silver clock cracked down the center. Her grandfather was gone. So was Isla. Elias stood alone in the ruined garden, his reflection fractured across 1,000 broken gears. Then, from the shattered remains of the great clock, came a faint sound, one single, steady tick. He turned. Among the debris lay a small brass pocket watch. Its face was engraved with a name. Isla Thorne. It opened on its own. Inside was a note, written in delicate ink. Time does not belong to us. But love always finds a way to begin again. The pocket watch ticked once more. And in that sound, soft but eternal, the world started turning again. Years passed, and Whitby's foggy streets returned to their quiet rhythm. The workshop remained, though it no longer belonged to anyone. Its windows reflected the sky, undisturbed by time, and the silver clock stood shattered yet beautiful, its pendulum frozen in a moment of eternity. No one spoke of the strange events that had once filled the town with ticking chaos. But sometimes, when the wind carried the faint scent of metal and rain, people claimed they could hear the soft, steady heartbeat of a clock in the distance. A small brass pocket watch appeared in the local market one morning, lying on a stall as if it had been placed there by invisible hands. Its face was engraved with a name, Isla Thorne. Children who held it claimed the watch hummed quietly, and in the quietest moments, they swore they could hear a lullaby, soft, comforting, like someone whispering that time was a gift, not a prison. In the ruins of the silver clock, threads of light lingered, entwined with the wind, carrying Isla's essence through Whitby. She had become part of time itself, not trapped, not gone, but watching, waiting, guiding. And in the quiet of night, when the fog rolled over the harbor, her grandfather's silhouette sometimes appeared in the shadows of the workshop. Yet he never moved, never spoke. He simply watched, a reminder of the cost of obsession, and the strength of love that endures beyond time. Time in Whitby ticked on, gentle and merciful. And somewhere in the pulse of every clock, a story of sacrifice, courage, and love beat quietly, forever.